Okay, Jai Baba everyone. As you could see from your programs, this afternoon we have 4 15, 20-minute sessions, 15 plus 5 of them, where the speakers face your blisteringly difficult questions on books 1 through 4. I really did want to give some specific attention to each of the books in Stay with God. The reason we're not covering book 5 is that Ross will encompass that in his talk tomorrow afternoon. So, Jeff gave us an introduction to the overall theme and structure this morning. And this is the overall structure, as you can see, divided into 5 books. The first being biographical, a biography of Meher Baba through 1955. The second, a love song from a drop soul in the ocean to the ocean itself. The third, a story of the ocean. Fourth, the journey to the feet of the perfect master. And the last, really, what was your phrase for it? You had a nice phrase, a triumphal something or other.
The new triumphant dispensation.
Yeah. So what I'll be talking about here is the first one, but I want, oops, sorry. I blinked it out. Here's Stay with God by numbers. I really do think that Francis gave a lot of attention to numerical formalities in his design of the whole poem. And that's not because I've ever heard anyone mention that, but because the poem, the epic, attests to it. We have these are the 5 books, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Number of sections or parts within each book, the number of stanzas per section, and the number of lines per stanza. So now look at the really nice symmetries that he has created. The first book has 7 sections, and I'm not just saying my subjective determination. These are actually formal separations that he's created. In the first part, he has a dividing line, dividing one section to another. 7 sections. The love song of John Carey is 1 section. God's speaking has 4 sections and a coda. He doesn't call it a coda, but I think that characterizes it well. The 4th book has 1 section and a coda, and the very massive 5th book has 4 parts. There's a preamble before the first of them, and there's a 5 stanza coda at the end. So 7, 1, 4, 1, 4 in terms of sections. I'll come back to book 1 in a minute. But book 2 is, book 1 has 7-line stanzas, and you'll notice book 5 has 14-line stanzas. In fact, it begins and ends with a sonnet, and the dedication is a sonnet, which is a 14-line poem with a particular rhyming scheme. The second book has 6-line stanzas. The third book has 10-line stanzas. The 4th book has 5-line stanzas, the steps of his feet, and 14-line stanzas in the 5th. So he's quite consistent throughout each book in maintaining stanza length. Lines there's not a formal meter that he uses. Jeff has been paying a lot of attention to that in our recent discussions. It seems like the lines on the average are about 15 syllables or so, though there's a lot of variability in that. But notice the symmetries here. The first book divided into 7 sections. Okay, the first section is 7 stanzas. The second is 14. The third is 101, which is a significant number. 16 and 16. 24 for the 6th section, and you'll notice that book 2 has 24 stanzas also. and the last section, which is the coda, has 5. So it looks like those are intentional symmetries that he's created there. 24 stanzas in the love song of John Carey. In book 3, each section has 10 stanzas exactly, and then there's the 1 stanza coda. Book 4 has 40 stanzas, and in book 5, each part has 40 stanzas. 40, 40, 40, 40. The coda is 5, and there's a preamble. So what I'm saying is that Francis, it seems to me self-evidently, gave a lot of attention to the formal symmetries in the greater design of the thing. Now into book 1, book 1 is a biographical narrative of Meher Baba's life from 1955. It's divided into 7 unequal sections. Poetically, the narrative is organized into stanzas of 7 lines each. Neither here nor in any other book does Francis employ a regular poetic narrative. The poetry is highly rhythmical, however, in its irregular way. In general, Francis uses long lines of about 15 syllables, though he varies this considerably. And now, this is how he has divided up his subject matter. Okay, again, 7, 14, 101, 16, 16, 24, and 5. That's the numbers that he's used for his 7 sections. And it can be characterized as a biographical narrative interspersed with numerous thematically significant digressions. I'll be saying a little bit about that. The first part, and as you'll see, where's, actually it's here. Yeah, of those 7 sections, the third is by far the longest, 101 stanzas, is well more than half of it. And Baba gave Francis the order at the Mehrabad Sahabas in 1955. And I think I read in Robert Rouse's book that Baba told him and Don to write books about what they had experienced there, something like that. Ross, or others correct me if I'm wrong. And so that's naturally the ending point of the biographical narrative. By the way, Baba did tell Francis later, in the 60s, when he was staying at Mehrabad, to write a biography of him. And he did publish the first volume and was heroically engaged in trying to work on the second up to the end of his life. So this biography is not to be dismissed. It's done in a poetic form, unlike the Silent Word, which is a prose narrative. And when he gets to the 1955 Sahabas, in the course of his narrative, a lot of it, this is the section 7 there, oh no, section 6, the Mehrabad Sahabas, attended by John Carey. There he introduces himself under another name. And a lot of it is an account of Baba's discourse on that occasion. Now earlier, the opening 7 stanzas of the first section are a declaration of the avataric theme, which Francis returns to in the 5th book. Now the second is about Baba's, a very brief account of Baba's childhood, contact with Brabazon up to his contact with Upasani Maharaj. The 3rd section, which is by far the longest, takes the story, the gathering of the disciples, the Manzili-Neem, the Mehrabad ashram in the 1920s, travels to the west, and the must work. This last, that is the must work, is by far the longest. And one thing that strikes me about this is that Francis gives very little attention to travels to the west. He, in fact, he encompasses it in a single stanza. I get the impression that he might have been partly responding to biographies written until that point, which the Western tours kind of took over the whole book. So he was definitely not doing that. and to the contrary, was giving real attention to the must work. It gets a lot more attention than anything else does. Section 4, from the great seclusion through the end of the new life, I notice in it that Francis, there's very little about the stories from the new life itself. And it occurred to me, thinking about this the last few days, maybe he didn't have access to any of those narratives that we have gotten since then. He would have had those documents, the New Life circulars, that describe the meetings at the beginning, but they don't tell any of the stories of the new life. So he really describes the principles and spirit and significance of the new life, and gets it up to the point where the new life is about to begin, and then ends his account of the new life. Section 5 is about the free lives, the complicated free life, the full free life, and the fiery free life in 1952, up through Baba's declaration of avatarhood. There's a long section there where he quotes from the highest of the high. About several stanzas are in fact a quotation of those messages. And as I said, in the Mirabad's Hafiz in 1955, which is when he actually got this order from Baba, he spends a number of stanzas, quite a bit of it, relating in Baba's own voice, not any verbatim quotation, but relating Baba's discourse, Baba's messages that he gave at that time. I wonder what Francis's sources of this would be. I would like to know. Somebody, I think Kissan Singh wrote the diary. And the last section, which is a kind of a coda, 5 stanzas, is a really great restatement of the avataric theme, which is, actually it isn't 5, it's 7 stanzas, which is central to this entire biography. The biography is very much a thematic one. It's about about God incarnating in this age, and this is his life story. Now, some of the digressions I wanted to comment on because they're a very prominent part of his biographical account. Oh yes, and here's where he introduces himself. Besides these was one, John Carey. This is actually setting up book 2, which is the love song of John Carey. So he introduces him as a character into a story. I mean, it's not designed to fool anyone, obviously it's him. An Irish, English, Australian in his 49th year, threshold according to the Hindu classical and Sufi reckoning of old age, there for a whole month, and so forth. The next stanza goes on with that. Now, the digressions play a major role, and he actually sets up some of the major themes of the whole book in them. There are a couple of them. When he's been talking about the early years at Mirabad in the 1920s, Francis talks about how fiery Baba would be. And perhaps, well, anyway, he uses this moment to explain that point because it would not have at all been intelligible to a Western audience of that kind, of that time, that conceived of Jesus as in terms of sweetness and light. So this is where he brings up that theme, and it was been read a couple of times. In fact, this morning, I think you had this, didn't you?
Yes.
We have been evilly brought up, and there is no evil like ignorance or willful distortion of the truth of God's avatar to the view of Jesus' sacrifice, without this view balanced by an understanding of his glory, his divine terribleness. The Lamb has been shown to us, the Lion, creator and sustainer and destroyer of universes and lives, suppressed, a pernicious doctrine, fosterer of subjection and tyranny, betrayal of truth and love. And he goes on with that as a very important theme throughout the whole book.
Questions?
Yeah, okay, let's see if there's any last thing I want to say before opening this up. I will just say that he begins the section with what is called a proem, like Homer did, Andramoyene pe musa pulutropon, a formal invocation of the muses. He does that in his own way, invoking Baba and declaring his inadequacy and saying, only if you fill me can I complete this task. So he really frames his undertaking very much in explicitly epic terms. All right, yeah, Michael?
The word digression seems to be an absolutely appropriate word, and I like the way you just named it as that.
Yes.
But I don't know anything about classical music, but I noticed yesterday in the reading the word fugue and fugal came up 2-3 times. And is a fugue, in classical music, is a fugue something that wanders off? Is that what it is? Does anyone know?
I would say no.
Oh, okay.
Actually, a fugue rather rigorously repeats the same themes in various voices and various forms.
In psychiatry, it's wandering off, so
A
And
fugue
it
is
means flight. It means
it may mean that, but it's not.
it's not used that way in classical
At least not in my. I played a lot of Bach as a kid, and you see the same themes coming back. Now he does do that also.
Yeah.
But and at the end of his first digression, he says, this really hasn't been a digression because it's advanced our argument. That is, the master has two aspects, the fiery and the gentle. He correlates these with the sun and the moon, as Geoff mentioned, a big theme throughout the book, man and woman. We could say yin and yang. I wish that Francis didn't, but it would fit exactly.
Yeah.
And that theme continues throughout the whole book, so he establishes that in his first digression. Actually, yes.
I was just thinking with the fugue, you have the minor to start and it comes back with the major interpretation of the motive and then goes back to a minor.
Yes.
Similar to the light and the dark and the yin-yang idea.
You know, when we have our semester study, I only happened just here. The use of musical methods in Stay with God really calls out for study. It really does. Theme and variation, there's been no time to talk about that, although I'll mention a little bit when we get to book 3. Yeah, Tony?
When you say the biography was thematic, are you just referring to the fact that he concentrated on various themes, such as the mass trips and other?
It is thematic in that sense too, in that he featured certain phases of Baba's life, but not others. But also he brings in certain major, like digressions, major themes. Here's another instance of a digression that's thematic. After his one stanza on the trips to the West, where he doesn't mention the disciples at all, I think of Kitty and Elizabeth and Margaret saying, who is he? Is he? I'm jesting here, of course. But after that, he has 5 or 6 stanzas on poverty. Now, in those days, the East was seen as poor and the West as rich. And clearly, part of Francis's purpose was to say, this is real poverty, poverty of God. And he accentuates that point later on. So it's not an accidental digression at all. Also, when he comes to talking about the musts, the way he starts, and we wish we had more time about this, is with the Odyssey and Odysseus' return, his experience of Circe and other experiences on the journey home, which Francis is clearly interpreting as representative of the inner journey and the hazards of the inner journey. He passes the test of Circe, which is like the Tantra, something like that sort. So his digressions are really quite relevant to the material that he's talking about. How much time are we doing? Should I stop here?
Yeah.
Okay. All righty.
Thank you, Ward. Setting up, then I'll offer you another diversion for a digression. From Peter and Sonia, Kadia and Grant have had a baby boy.